Hi everybody, I'm super excited that everyone's here. Thank you for joining us. It is our second conversation with Chaeli. Woo! And today we're going to focus on refugee rights. So I'm super excited to have the incredible people that I have on today as guests and friends and fellow human rights warriors. To introduce myself to some who don't know, I'm Katie Mycroft. I am the founder and global ambassador for the Katie campaign, an ability activist, also a Children's Peace Prize recipient, as are our two main speakers today. A little bit of logistics before we start. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so please use the chat, get involved, and share your thoughts. If everybody is ready, I'm going to request our incredible panelists to introduce themselves. Let's start with Baruani. Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and like your journey of becoming a refugee and where you're at now?
Hello, everyone. My name is Baruani Estashidume. I'm the International Children's Peace Prize winner 2009, advocating for children's rights, especially refugees. Currently, I'm in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, but in the past 2 years, I've been in Cape Town studying. But last year, I came to Dar es Salaam to renew my travel document because I'm using a Tanzania refugee travel document. So it was difficult for me to renew it in Cape Town. So I have to come to Dar es Salaam to renew my travel document. So currently I'm in Dar es Salaam and I'm happy to be part of the panelists on the Chaeli More Than a Refugee conversation today. So I'm very happy and I hope you will enjoy, and I will share more about my experience as a refugee in activism. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thanks, B. Mohamad, do you want to share a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. First, thank you everybody for showing up, and thank you, Chaeli, for inviting us to the panel. My name is Mohamad Al-Jinde. I was born and raised in Syria. I left in 2013. So if you don't know, in 2011, a revolution started in Syria. And then slowly, because of the regime that we had, which was a dictatorship, the revolution ended up to become a war. And that caused a lot of people to flee. I personally did not get impacted by the war directly, but my mother, who participated in the revolution and in the protests, got arrested twice, which meant that we have to leave as soon as possible, because if she got arrested that third time, she might pass away or she might never get out of the prison. So we fled to Lebanon. Lebanon is the first neighboring country to Syria. And and in the mid or end of 2013, we were in Lebanon, and we lived there. I lived there for 4 years. We started a couple of projects that we'll hopefully talk about later in the panel. And I lived as a refugee, and I was only 12 because I'm 19. But back then I was only 12. And I actually became kind of a refugee again because I had to leave Lebanon to Sweden, because my dad left to Sweden when we were in Lebanon. Like the moment we arrived to Lebanon, after like a year, he left to Sweden because the situation in Lebanon is not good for the refugees. There isn't a lot of work, there isn't education. I was not able to go to education when I first arrived. So he wanted to ensure that we have a better future, and he went to Sweden. Unfortunately, it took us 4 years to follow him, but we're finally here. And now I reside in Sweden. I just graduated high school. I'm going to university this year. So in literally like 20 days, I'll be in university. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself. Hopefully, we'll get into more details later on.
Totally. Thanks, Mo. I think that you both have such incredible stories of resilience and figuring out how to do life in a very different space is what you're used to. I feel so privileged to be able to work with you guys and to have very deep conversations with you. I would love it if you can share some of um, some of the work that you guys do, and also one of the big things that we've spoken about a lot is um, that even though you come from very different circumstances, there are also common experiences. And both of you, Mo and B, you both have used storytelling as a way of connecting people and sharing and expressing what's happening. So, B, can you tell us a little bit about your what you did in the refugee camp in Yogusu, and also um, how that worked, and then Mo, can you tell us some stuff about the cool ways that you use storytelling to get messages across. So B.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think I will first start with the process on how I became a refugee in Tanzania in 1999 when the war broke up in the DRC in our village. And well, we was forced to flee because of the situation of the war. But unfortunately, I lost my parents, my mother and my young brother during the war. And the situation was really bad because we didn't expect such kind of things to happen. So it did happen surprisingly, and we was forced to flee. And when I arrived in Kigoma in Dar es Salaam, in Kigoma in Tanzania, it was difficult because on my way to flee to Tanzania, I met an old woman called Chakubuta. She was the one who supported me according to my age because I was only 7 years old at the time until we arrived in Kigoma. So it was difficult because I didn't have any member of the family who can be together with me or who can support me. So what we did, it was like she said, this is one of my child, the one I come with in Congo, so that it can be easy for me to get the documents as a refugee. Because at the time, it was difficult to be connected if you don't have any family members. So I had to be a grandchild until we went to the refugee camp in Nyarugusu. So when we reached Nyarugusu, because she has a daughter also in the camp who was also married, so I started staying with them. But what was on my thought was like, we are here for like a few moments, and then after that, we'll be on our way back, and then we can see how I'll find my other family members and see if I can go back to my country. But it was difficult and it was not easy, and we ended up being in the camp for more than 10 years. So the life in the beginning with the family was a bit difficult because, to be honest, Africans families, we have a bit different when to treat your child the same way to treat the child who is not yours. So it was difficult at the beginning. the treatment for me, it was a bit different because I have to make sure that I do all the family work just to be allowed to go to school or to go to play. Until in 2004, because in the camp, there used to be organization which was supporting refugees, and those organizations was also working with the UNHCR. So there was the World Vision International, which was supporting education and child protection. So they have a program which was called the Child Voice Out program. So they came to our school and we had a chance to meet them, and they asked us what you can do. We can support you, we can help you. Just in case you have any problem, you may just come to us and then let us know how we can help you. And then I feel like this is a good opportunity for me to share my story with these people and see if they can support me, because even the family I'm staying with, the situation is not good. So it is better to let these people know and see if they can help me. And then at the end of the day, I share my story with them. And what they did was like, we don't have a place where we can take you, and we don't have another family which you can stay with. But what we'll do, we will go to that family, and then we'll speak to them, and then we'll see maybe they can change in the future. But it was good because they good result came afterwards, and they started treating me the same as the family member, and I started enjoying staying with them for all those years. And then in 2007, because I went through that situation, and the World Vision, I stayed connected with the World Vision Child Voice Out program, and I wanted to continue with this program. So I feel like, no, I think there is more children who are facing like me, but they don't have a chance to know how they can voice out and how they can get help. So I started a program with Child Voice Out program, and I involved some of my friends in at school so that to support me to make sure that we support other children who are facing the same problem as we were facing. At the time, Tanzania had almost 18 refugee camps. So we used to go to all those refugees together with the UNICEF organization and World Vision. We went to the different refugees, and I was trying to speak with them and see maybe some of them they can get support as what I get from World Vision. And at the end of the day, I feel like, no, I think as going around different refugee camps is not going to help. So I think what we need to do, maybe we should start a radio program, because we all know that radio is a powerful thing to just to give people information to know exactly what is happening at the same time. So we wrote a letter to the UNHCR Child Protection Program, and I asked them about my suggestion that I feel like we can start a radio program in the camp, but we need to connect our program to the national radio, what's called the Radio Quizera, because through that Radio Quizera, we can reach hundreds of children from different refugee camps at the same time. So we started that radio program, and one of our objectives was to connect our fellow children who were also separated with their family, because some of them, the family members was in Burundi, was even in different refugee camps in Tanzania, and some of them was back in Congo. So we helped almost like 50 to 60 children to reunite with their families on the radio program. But also in the camp, we started a children parliament. This children parliament was a group of children from different villages, because in Nyarugusu we have almost 56 villages, and we have got 56 representatives from those villages supporting us to get information on children's, especially GBV issues and other different children rights programs. So at the end of the day, in 2009, I won the International Children Peace Prize for that works of supporting my fellow children and reuniting some of them with their family members. And then after that, I continued with the radio program. I also started other GBV program with the girls and women's programs in the refugee camp. So this is how I started, and until now I became through Peace Right, I became an international activism and dealing with the children's refugee issues. Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, B. And the activism continues. It also shows how just because you became a refugee when you were 7, it doesn't necessarily just it doesn't just disappear. The challenges are continuous and they change and they evolve. Thank you for sharing.
Okay,
Mo,
thank you so much.
you tell us a little bit about your storytelling and your work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, uh, like I agree with Barwani. I think that's something that most refugees go through, is that they don't necessarily know that they're gonna become refugees, and that's what Barwani said in the beginning, that like he did not really know that he's gonna end up being a refugee, and that's what also happened to me. It's a bit different, as I mentioned in my short introduction. We did not necessarily get impacted by the war, which that even made me not realize that I might become a refugee, if a refugee even more, because I've never felt this direct impact. Of course, like small things happen in my hometown, but not like not on a large scale, not like on other cities in Syria. So I've always felt that yeah, like I'm unsafe, nothing is happening, and I was too young. I was 11 to know that what it means to be arrested and what it means to be a political activist. So when my mom was arrested twice, I did not necessarily know that, oh, we might flee. So at some point in one day, without knowing at all, my parents just woke me and they were like, "Yeah, we need to go." And I was like, "Go where?" We were like, "Oh, we're gonna." They did not tell me necessarily that we're going to flee the country, because they don't want me to make a trouble or anything. They said, "We're going to visit your aunt in Egypt," because my aunt was in Egypt before. Um, and then we left the country, we arrived to Lebanon, and then they told me like, "Hey, we're not going back." And then I realized like, oh, at first I felt like I was kidnapped, but then I realized that they're my parents, so that can't happen. But then I realized that I think what most refugees realize at some point of their lives, that their life as they know it ended, and now they have to start from the 0 point all over again. This is, of course, way easier for younger refugees like myself. Maybe, well, in certain aspects. When I was 11, I did not have a lot of roots yet back home. For older refugees like my parents, I've noticed how much they struggled in starting a new life from the zero. Um, and in the situation in Lebanon was also we were a bit let's say more privileged, and we were able to live in an apartment rather than a camp in a tent, in a one-room apartment, my family, but it was still better than a tent. But as all the refugees in Lebanon, we had no access to education, and um, and I did not have much to do because I was 12 years old in Lebanon with not going to school. So what would I do, you know? But after like a couple months, my family started volunteering with a Syrian it started volunteering with a Syrian voluntary team in a Syrian refugee camp. And then I started joining them because, as I said, I had nothing much to do. So in the Syrian refugee camp, there was a lot of Syrian children, and they were almost my age or my age. And I spent most of my time with them because I had no friends because I was out of school. So because I spent most of my time with them, I started learning their stories, and I slowly got better in telling my own story and coping with my own story, because I've heard a lot of stories about children who went through way worse things than I did. Some of them witnessed their parents pass away. Some of them witnessed their friends, their whole cities go to the ground. And I realized that how different stories might be, and how it's important to know in what way you tell your story, and to understand how, let's say, unprivileged or how unprivileged and privileged you are in certain cases. And when it comes to storytelling, the first people who taught me how to say my stories, the children that I hang out with, which is where my friends as well. Um, And they always told their stories, which the way I tend to tell my stories nowadays, in not of empathetic way. Like they don't seek empathy from other people. They want you to know and want you to make sure that you know that they're strong enough to survive all that. So they more convey strength rather than sympathy, and that's something I've learned through them. And because I wanted to preserve that, I wanted to feel like, oh, this is my treasure, and I wanted to keep it to myself, you know. I thought of like, how can we do that? How can I stay friends with these people? And after talking with all the adults in my life back then, which is my parents, the volunteers who were with us, and a lot of other people, we came up with the idea of building the school. So in 2014 was when I started, when I built, well, not when like we started the school, or we started the idea of the school. And and the school, as I said before, it was just for us. It wasn't much of a school, as much of a place for us to meet, me and the other children, to meet, talk, tell our stories, exchange ideas, and all these things. So it started more of a community. That's also one of the aspects that I feel refugees always seek to do, is building communities wherever they go, and they get really good at it. After like they seek, or they get displaced multiple times, they get better in building small communities wherever they are. And that was our goal. It was never to build a school or to go on a quest to change the world or to offer education to all the children. It was as personal as it might seem. I wanted friends, and I wanted to have a community that allows me to stay with these friends. And I think a lot of refugees who go to change something in their situation, to change something in the world, they do it to change their own situations. And that's what keeps it more of authentic and pure. And because of the things I've talked about, because we were very clear what our goal is, and we were very honest that it's to help I was very honest that it helps me, and I'm getting helped by all the work that I'm doing and the people I'm working with, including the children. It became attractive to a lot of other people, and they started supporting us. And yeah, and the school got bigger because of other people's support. Most of the support comes as financial support, other comes as volunteer, which also relates back to the way we told our story. As I said, we told it from, it's my story. It's a very personal story to me, the work that I do, the activism. It's where I felt safe. It's where I could feel that I have a life, it made me who I am. So when I tell the story of the work that I do, I tell my story. And that also attracted a lot of volunteers to experience this, to make their own small or big stories in the community that we've built. So a lot of them started coming to the school and working with us. And that was the most fascinating part of our work. And that actually what showed me how important it is to know how you tell your story, or to feel comfortable enough in telling your story, and what an impact it can have. And we've been running the school since then, so for almost 6 years now. And the school is always getting a little bit bigger by time. Sometimes it gets smaller, depends on the situation. And Lebanon is not an easy country to work in. It suffers from a lot of issues: political corruption, economical inflation, poverty as well. So the refugees who live there, they don't usually have access to any resources to improve their lives because of the situation of the country as a whole, which made our lives a bit harder, and which makes other refugees' lives a bit harder, and which make our work harder. And that's also, I think, when Baruani touched on it, it's the situation of most refugees that arrives to a refugee camp or to the first country they migrate to, they seek safety to, because it's not always the neighboring countries are not, in most cases, are not safe or are not well equipped to host refugees, which makes the struggle even worse for refugees, which also make them always feel in a constant fear, or in a constant risk, in a sense, which in turn built this this coping and the surviving mechanism in most of the refugees to seek the betterment of their lives in different ways. And one of them was, and the most important one of them to me and to all of the people that I worked with, was not just education, which I think we'll talk about later. It was more of storytelling as well. It's yeah, you just know who you are when you tell a story. You know your value and you know your strength, and that's something that it's important for refugees to know, because a lot of times the world perceives refugees as like weak. They need constant help, but then they go and meet refugees and they hear the stories of these refugees and they realize like, oh damn, they're quite strong people. You know, if I went what they went through, I might not have been able to survive, which was my reaction when I met other refugees. And then yeah, and then it changed your perspective. So I think that's when it comes to storytelling and the work we do, that's what I have to say about it.
Thanks, Mo. We have some questions. So B, there was a couple of questions for you, asking about your educational experience, and what some of the challenges have been for you in gaining an education.
Concerning my story at the beginning, I was supported with the World Vision because I love school and I believe in school, and I think going to school is something very important, because if you want to change the world, if you want to change people's lives, you must make sure that you are educated. So when I was at school, for example, in the camp, the most challenges was that because we have got hundreds of students who are graduating from high school every year. And the problem was like, what will be my next step after I finish my high school? Because I've got a lot of students, a lot of young people in the camp. Once they finish high school, they just stay in the camp because there is no other way, there is no other chance for them to continue with university. So it was, for me, it was like, it means that when I finish my high school, then it's done for me. And what will be my next move now? So what will be my future? What will I do to move out of this situation? So it was stressing at the moment. But when I won the prize and I get that chance to go to school, but even though I got some challenges, which was because in the camp we are studying according to the Congolese academic situation. So we are doing French, and which is different with Tanzania, because Tanzania they're doing English. So it was difficult for me to go to the Tanzanian university as a refugee, because according to the law and the rules on how they treat refugees, it is difficult for a refugee to go to the Tanzanian university and study. So for me to get the university or school for me to study after I graduated my high school, it was difficult because we have to work very hard to make sure that I go, and I wanted to go because I want to be educated. And it took me almost 2 years to get the document to move from the camp to South Africa, because it was like, we found an alternative in South Africa and I want to go there to study. So it was difficult according to the situation of the camp and how the Tanzania government is treating refugees. So it took 2 years until when I get the documents and I was allowed to leave the country to go to South Africa. So that's how it happens with other refugees. But hundreds of children are graduating every year, but they don't go to university because there is no chance for them to go start outside the camp. So that's the problem.
I think this is a really good reflection of how patient you've been with as a refugee, but also you found your voice in advocating for yourself. And that's what Mo was saying, that a lot of the activism that comes for refugees comes from refugees to better the situations that they're living in, to make it better for other people. And that's amazing that people are still thinking about making it better for others as well. One technical question, B, was how exactly did your radio station connect children with their families?
In the camp, what it was doing at the time was from back in 2008, 2009 till 2014. What we used to do, it was like, because radio Kwizera is a national radio, which is in Ngara, is like, it's like I don't know how long is that from Kigoma to Ngara, but that's a radio quiz that is a national radio. So what was doing, they used to come to the camp, and then the records, we met with the children, where we give them the information that what you're going to do now is just give us a list of how many kids who want to be reunited with their family, and then we'll come and record them with their full names and address and everything, and then we'll use to the program. So it was like I started a program like, my name is Baruani, and today on our program we are discussing about this topic, and we have this certain number of the children, and I will read their names, and then they will come to the mic, and then they will give their biography, their full names and their family names, and say they are looking for their parents. Because Radio Kwizera, people in Burundi, people in Congo, those East Africa countries can hear that radio. So it was easy for other people, or for the family members, or for their parents in Congo, to hear from their children from the camp. And what we used to do, we used to give the address of the organization which was supporting connecting. If we found out that this child, his father is in Burundi, what we can do, we can use the International Committee of Red Cross, even UNICEF, to connect with their parents so that they can go and meet their parents. Because before we send them to their parents, we used to need some photos from their parents for them to confirm, no, this is my father, this is my mother, or this is my uncle. And then after that, they will go and meet their families. So we did almost 6 to 7 with online, so we knew that it helps a lot, because at that time, many refugees, many children was far from their families. Yeah.
That's so cool. That's, I think, a tool that so many refugees have, that they figure out how to be hustlers, and that you can figure out a way through any situation. Ma, we got some questions for you. There was a question about whether the recent um, explosion in Beirut has affected refugees. Also, whether it's affected your school in any way. So before you answer that for me, I'm gonna give a question that can go to you and to Baruani, asking, have you ever experienced moments where you felt that people limited your identity to your refugee status?
I think you also know about that, because that's something that I've been going through most of the times before, when I was in the camp. Because some people think that when you are a refugee, you have no right to do anything. You have no right for movement. You have no right for having friends in and outside the camp. So they can say no, because you're a refugee, safe in the camp. It's okay, I'm safe in the camp, but I'm not free for movement to go and meet other people, or to do what I want to do outside of the camp. So that's something that I was going through most of the time. But I remember for the first time when I traveled outside the country, outside of the continent, I went to the Netherlands. And when I went to the airport in Dar es Salaam, first of all, they started asking for me, because I have a refugee document. How will I get the possibility to travel to go to Europe? So they feel like, because I'm a refugee and I'm using refugee document, I don't have the right to move to go to Europe if I have to, if there's a possibility for me to do so. So they feel like, no, because a refugee, we don't think maybe you can do what you want to do. I was like, no, because I'm invited, and I'm going to the conference, and I've got all the documents. But why can you say that you don't feel like I'm allowed to go because I'm a refugee? So this is something that I've been going through most of the time. But also, I think I remember I was with you, was traveling from Amsterdam to London. It was like 2015, I think, 2015, 2014. I went to the airport in Heathrow, and I was stuck for like an hour. I went through a lot of interviews asking for me, and they think maybe because I'm a refugee from the camp, maybe I would not want to go back to the camp or go back to Tanzania. So this I've used to do because there is no other way I'll go out of it, because I'm already a refugee and I need to accept all the challenges, but also I need to make sure that I fight for it, because if I have got all the documents with me which allow me to go anywhere, wherever I want to go, I don't need, no one will say I don't allow to do it, because what makes me to move is because I'm a human and I've got the right for movement. But because I'm a refugee doesn't mean I'm not allowed to do what I want to do or whatever I want to go. So I've been through a lot of this. Even this year now, last year in September, I traveled from Cape Town to Dar es Salaam to come and renew my travel document. So it's almost a full year now. I've been going back and forth to fight for this, because people think that if you're a refugee, you don't have right for anything, and you can't say anything about it. You just sit there and someone do it for you, and just sit there and wait for their own time to make choice for you, or to choose to make the decision for you. No, you need to stand up and fight for it, because we are refugees. We are all human. Just a refugee name, but we are humans, so we can't be treated in a different ways. So I'm fighting for it until everybody understands that we are all the same people and we do the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you. But have you had similar experiences that Bee's speaking about? Also, you spoke about building communities being important to refugees. How in today's society, especially now with the pandemic and also just with people becoming less connected, how do you build that community when there are all of these stereotypes and these limitations and people judging you because you are a refugee?
I mean, I think I'll try to answer all of them. I think the first thing is like, yeah, for sure. I mean, your identity or your reality as a refugee, which is a reality that has been imposed on you rather than it's your own choice, is hunting us wherever we go as refugees. Like similar experiences to Baruani. Wherever I travel, I have to have stack of my passport, of my oldest passport to my newest passport, and I have to have a separate bag for all the papers that I've issued throughout my whole life. And I always have to go like 4 hours earlier from any flight if I want to travel abroad, just to just to be able to fly. And eventually, when I got the Swedish residency as a refugee, my life became way easier, which shows you how there is like this differences between the world, between different parts of the world. Other than that, people's perceptions of refugees, as I've talked in the beginning, as if they're not capable of doing certain things. And for a lot of time, our work through education and in our school has been specifically to teach one action, to teach the children to reclaim their realities. What I mean by reclaiming their reality is being a refugee, being a survivor from war, is a reality that has been imposed on these children, including myself, including on most refugees. They've never chose it. But what they can do is they can reclaim the reality to make it into their own versions. So there's a lot of things that we went through as refugees that are like, as I said, traveling or stuff like that. But I think I would rather to talk about how we might be able to, or how we were able to do it, and how we were able to feel pride in being refugee. One of that relates back to your question of how we were able to build communities during the pandemic. It's very funny because as refugees, all the things that people are going through now, we've already been through them, you know, like being distanced from your loved ones and having to Skype with them the whole time. That's basically my life for the past 8 years. You know, since I left Syria, the only way I connected with my friends, with my family, with my mom now, as she lives in Lebanon and I live in Sweden, is through Zoom, through Skype. So those are things we're used to. Being stuck in a specific areas because you can't leave is something refugees are used to, because in most countries, refugees are isolated in areas by the government or by the local populations, and they're not allowed to leave it. So lockdowns is something we're used to. And I think this is one of the worst and biggest perceptions of refugees, or of anything, basically. In a lot of cases, we assume that the catastrophes and the pandemic and those global issues is something that is in the future. You know, like, for example, there's going to be a catastrophe if we did not do this. For a lot of refugees, and I think people need to understand that refugees are one of the few populations, and a large population, because there's a lot of refugees in the world, they've already went through catastrophes. They've already went through the end of their world as they know it, and they survived. So this is something it's very important for us, I think, to understand. And they survive through creating these communities. How we do so? It's very simple, by talking. As much as you can talk to, as much as I talked to people I know or people I don't know, like you guys, I felt like part of a community. Like when I also won the International Student Peace Prize in 2017. And then when I met you, Chaeli, and I met Baruani and everyone, and I felt like, oh, God, like you're also activist, even though completely different from my life, from a completely different world, from a country that I've only heard about in movies, from South Africa. I was like, I feel like I'm part of you all, you know? And this made me feel like I'm part of a small community, even if for a short period of time, or even for not necessarily like always with you. Like I don't live with you, or I don't live in the country, but I still, whenever I talk to you, I feel like we have a common ground. And this is simply by talking. There's always common ground between people, even between refugees. Like, yes, we've went through all the things that we've went through, and our lives were difficult, but we also like movies, for instance. So so we can find these communities in different worlds just from talking. And this is something that we've been focusing on quite a lot, and this is something that is getting difficult by time. So if we've been talking about the explosion in Beirut, it's to be honest, it was quite devastating, because Beirut was a home for almost for like more of 1 million refugees, or Lebanon as a whole. And as I've said before, Lebanon has been suffering for quite a lot of time from a political corruption and from economical, let's say, hardships or inflation or whatever you want to call it. And the explosion just made it worse. But from that explosion, we've seen a lot of people realizing that, yeah, like something needs to change from the local population, from the refugees. Like we need to rethink about how we're living our lives, and we need to come together as a bigger community. So for a long time, refugees have built their own communities in specific areas of Lebanon, and the local population already had their own communities. Now we felt that because there's even more, the experiences of refugees and the population is more deep with the hardships they're facing together, they came together as communities or as a society. And that's something that was quite interesting. And I'm always worried to say it quite positive, because there's nothing positive about an explosion, but but it's something that that is good. It's something that might help in the future, or is helping now as well. So I hope I answered the questions. I'm not sure.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think it's always really important to get insight from people who are living through these experiences. Both of you show is that catastrophe can be a catalyst for change, and that you can turn a negative situation into something good and something that can make a change. So I think that would be a really cool way to kind of wrap up this part of the discussion. I'm so grateful to Mo and to Baruani for being open with us and sharing your stories and experiences with us. Before we go into our breakaways, I would like to turn on your videos so we can see your beautiful faces. Everybody look however you want to look so we can share with people how excited everybody is.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, perfect. My fellow lovely humans, we are going to now have everybody inputting, we're making that a word now, your ideas and thoughts. What we're going to ask today, 2 questions. The first thing that we're going to talk about is thinking about the refugees in your communities. How do their experiences differ from your experiences? The second question is, in what ways have you engaged with refugees in your life, and how can we engage better? I'm sending you away now. It's now your opportunity to share with the bigger group what your thoughts are. I'm going to start with group 4 and ask Kendall to share.
So we were all South African in the group. We kind of agreed that we didn't have much experience, or we didn't know many refugees personally, except for Baruani, who we had all met. And we discussed a lot of the situations in other places, such as Europe, where a lot of the Western countries seem to be more accepting because they don't necessarily get as many refugees, because most of them do end up settling in Eastern countries, or they're told to stay in the Eastern countries like Greece, which is close to a lot of the areas that are fled. We also discussed how it's not always, conflict isn't always the reason that people leave their countries. So they're environmental refugees, or it's because of the economics of the country. Yeah.
For that feedback, good job. So I am going in no particular order, because why do we need order? So how about we have Taylor for group 1.
Hey guys, it was really, really cool to actually have this conversation. And I want to say thank you to Chaeli and the Chaeli campaign for facilitating this. It's really, really awesome. And it was amazing to meet our guests today and to have a breakaway group. And it was really interesting to speak with everyone, because we had people from sort of different areas, from the US, from here, and from Uganda, here being South Africa, and found that there were a couple of themes that I sort of picked up from either side. And that on the refugee side is that of dignity. It seems that in a lot of cases, or at least from what we can understand of the experiences we've had meeting people that are refugees, is that legal structures don't enable their access to social services or employment. And that violates their dignity. It means that they can't really live out a life that they feel they want to live, or take steps that they want to take in their lives. And then on the other side, as those receiving refugees in the country, is to have empathy. And to lend an ear to those people and be friends and help uplift them in your own community. And I mean, Sue, who's Amber Rose's aunt, mentioned it at one stage, that we're in a situation now where due to lockdown or whatever, it's been difficult to go and see your family. And something that she had realized when she was living in Kuwait was that people who are refugees can't go back to see their family. They don't have a choice. And that's something that's very difficult in your own lived experience. Having your choice and your dignity taken away from you is very difficult. And we need to actually realize that that's an incredible privilege to have. And to then, on the other side of things, have empathy for those that are coming into your communities and help uplift them. So in terms of actually bettering engagement with people, we figured, and Hannah actually pointed out, since she's in New York, that people in communities like hers that don't experience a lot of engagement with refugees need to be educated on what being a refugee means and what it is. Because people often have an idea of it, but don't really understand the implications of that psychologically, socially, and especially economically, because that sort of trickles down into everything. We need to avoid xenophobia, and especially, for example, in South Africa, where something like that is prevalent already. We need to educate people on lending an ear and being helpful to people. And that was a great insight that we had from Matumba, since he's based in Uganda. He's had a lot of experience with people who are refugees. And it was just really, really awesome to have this sort of perspective and this conversation. So that's what we had from our side today. And that also that the government in Uganda has a pretty good program at the moment where they're saying they're trying to give access to integration with society. And that's something that we can work on in our own society and campaign for and encourage within our own communities here. So yeah, I'd love to pass it back to you. And thank you guys for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Taylor. That's really good input and insight. Thank you for that. Let's hear from Vanya for group 3.
So basically in my group, we only had Baruani, me, and Riley, who didn't really actually know about like the challenges that refugees were facing in South Africa. So I decided to talk about how the refugees are living in Morocco. So for those who don't know, we have refugees from Syria and sub-Saharan refugees who try to go to Europe. So basically, I think that we have a big education problem for refugees here in Morocco. It's harder to get access to education when you're a refugee. You need to pass a test, and if you fail it, you need to repass it, and it's harder to prepare for it. You don't have the same resources as everyone. And also, I think it's harder for you to get a house. I think that people are in general afraid of the unknown and people that they don't know. So they wouldn't trust a refugee and rent their house to a refugee. So I think that maybe we should work into educating people and letting them understand that refugees are as normal as you are, and that by your help you can help them by trusting them. And in general, even here, I feel like people are always afraid of refugees. They don't want to socialize with them and have social interaction with them, and they just forget that having a social interaction with humans is really important, and that besides their small community or their camp, they can't really talk to others. So maybe we should also work on that point, trying to socialize more with them and trying to get to know their stories and what they're living. And also, we talked about how we try to engage in my school. We every summer at my school we try to organize parties in a refugee camp who's in another city. So we try to make them have a better summer, which isn't actually making their summer better, but just trying to make them happy. So yeah.
We're going to Danielle for group 2.
Yeah, thank you. So like you just mentioned, having people from different countries for a different perspective, our group had a lot of this. And the person from South Africa talked about the difference between asylum seekers and refugees and the resources that they have. So one example was brought up was the driver's license. It's not possible as an asylum seeker to to get a license and other things that you would be able to as a refugee. They also mentioned about the difficulty of some integration in communities, that governments may put people in different areas, but that not everyone is welcoming in those communities. And then really interesting actually that refugees and asylum seeker is not terminology that people would use in the state.
I was just speaking about, we have the city I live in is a sanctuary city, which in America means that our local law enforcement will not cooperate with federal immigration agents. Not an entirely enforceable policy, but it's certainly a political statement. And we have a large population of people who have come up from Central America, particularly Guatemala. America rarely use the term refugee or asylum seeker, and instead prefer to use the term immigrant, and specifically illegal immigrant, which then politicizes an individual instead of focuses on overall well-being and community. It's a very politicized, polarizing term.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, and then in Ireland, we shared experience of refugees and asylum seekers, how they have an area called direct provision, which is like a housing area. However, it's quite isolated, small housing and everyone together, and less resources, like extracurriculars and access to transportation. And most of those children, they would be more integrated in the school system, but they are going to school in more lower social economic and communities that they would have less education on refugees as well. And yeah, I think that's about what we talked about.
Awesome. Something that you mentioned about terminology is really important, because the way that we speak about things is really important, and it reflects how we think about things. So thank you, everybody. I think this has been a really valuable conversation. And the next conversation with Chaeli is going to be on the 19th of September. Make a note, people. It's gonna be good. So, we are celebrating in the next conversation. It's gonna be less intense, maybe. I don't know. On the 3rd of September, we are celebrating the 5-year anniversary of climbing and summiting Kilimanjaro. So, woo! We are gathering our team from Kilimanjaro to kind of reminisce and chat and share and cry maybe, and just live in that moment of being on a really amazing mountain. I'm very excited about it. Taylor was a team member of mine, so maybe we'll see him again. You will hear some of the ridiculous stories of what happened. And I think it's going to be really good. If you're keen to join us for that, it's going to be a vibe. And thank you to Baruani and Mo once again for giving us your time and sharing your stories with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody here for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. I hope it's been meaningful and insightful, and we'll see you next time.